We have from Recovery Point, Jeff Judy, Chief Cloud Architect at Recovery Point, and Aaron Brown, Senior Software Development Engineer at Recovery Point. Jeff and Aaron, the floor is now yours.
Hello, and thank you to the Redmond Magazine team for hosting this event. Today, we're discussing ransomware and how to recover from an attack. I'm Jeff Judy. I'm the Disaster Recovery Chief Cloud Architect for Recovery Point Systems. And today I'm joined by Aaron Brown, who is our Senior Software Development Engineer and part of our Managed Resiliency team. He's designed and developed our Resiliency Console, which provides disaster recovery planning, drift management, automated recovery, and reporting. He'll demo that for us in a few slides. Aaron, how you doing today?
Oh, not too bad. Thanks for having us here today. It's great to be here.
Great. A quick spotlight on us. We're Recovery Point. We are a disaster recovery service provider. We own and operate our own data centers. We support a wide range of platforms for disaster recovery, starting with IBM mainframe, PowerI, AIX, x86 virtual physical, and hybrid cloud solutions. So when we're talking about how to recover after an attack, I was thinking, we really need to rewind and take a look at what planning and testing was conducted way before the attack ever occurred. So I just want to show you a few numbers here to show you that upfront investment and time will pay off. And it's really the third line down there, USD $1.49 million. That is cost savings achieved by organizations with high levels of incident response planning and testing. So if you think about it, there's three things that it translates into. One would be real money. So it translates into revenue savings for companies where every minute of downtime can be costly. You can think about a company's public image. If you're able to recover rapidly, quickly, and efficiently, you save a lot of goodwill, and your business stays online. So people don't have to see the disruption, which are in the headlines every day with cyber attacks. And then audit and compliance regulations, which are becoming more stringent every day. So a company that wants to engage with you and do business with you may request a compliance check. We see that all the time when we're providing disaster recovery services. New clients come and say, hey, we need to see your own compliance checks for disaster recovery, cyber resiliency services. So we're in the business of resiliency, and we've been in this all we do all day, every day. And to really take a look at things here, the ransomware has provided a new wrinkle to disaster recovery services. Traditionally, you have disaster recovery planning, you have to do an impact assessment, and then you run DR testing and run your failover in those disaster recovery scenarios. And those things are still shared with ransomware recovery as well. But in this new world, you have to there's many additional things you have to account for. One of the major things would be partnering with providers that have cyber resiliency and incident response services. You will need an incident response provider to help you to stop the attack and run forensics, at the point of the attack. So you're going to need somebody that is well-versed and skilled and has the correct cyber tooling in place that can come in, they can understand the attack vector, where the attack plane came from, and then start to take actions. You also need a managed security service provider that can perform evidence collection. And then you need that disaster recovery provider that can restore, scan, rebuild your systems. You're going to need an environment that, on the production side, it may be completely shut down and isolated. Things may be totally encrypted, or you just pull the plug on that environment, or the police officers may have come in and shut the things down, shut your systems down for forensics analysis. So you're going to need an alternate site to recover into. And you're also going to need an environment that may be isolated initially. We can get into that in a couple slides. So
I think an important aspect of this, Jeff, is that you don't want to reintroduce a threat into a clean environment. So there is some additional concerns around that with ransomware attacks, right?
That's absolutely right. So if you take a look at the last 3 points, there's threat mitigation and removal is the one that you're really referencing there. And that is, if the threat is not entirely identified up front and you've gone through all your incident response recovery steps and you have everything restored, you may still be vulnerable. And then a few actual points here to think about also are data encryption and extortion and time sensitivity. So time sensitivity and extortion are where attackers are increasingly using double extortion tactics And that's where they're going to threaten to sell or auction off your confidential data. And if you don't pay the ransom in time. So they're trying to apply pressure in a time situation for you. So they combine that intense pressure to minimize downtime. It becomes a highly stressful situation. We recently had a client that had suffered an attack, was in the middle of doing restoration procedures. They were slow to respond to the ransomware demands and hadn't fully mitigated the attack. And so they suffered another breach and suffered created more downtime and more additional recovery steps that they had to take. So what's our approach to cyber resiliency? Well, there's three main points to look at here. There's preparation, there's recovery, and there's remediation. All are critical, but preparation is the key. Take a look at things here like business continuity and disaster recovery planning. Not only are you planning for your IT systems and data sets to be recovered, but you're also planning for people and processes to take place. People have to maybe take actions to build out new sites, authorize vendors to come in and take actions, things like that. So you have to plan for additional processes and people as well. Inventory management is very critical to disaster recovery planning. So you must know what systems you have on the wire, what are your critical data sets. So it's very important to invest time to understand what systems are critical to the business and where your risks lie. So once you have that mapping in place, once you understand what applications are critical to the business and what systems support those applications, then you can start to build out a recovery framework. And you can also build a budget around that. Maybe there's some systems that are extremely critical to your company, and then there could be other systems that can lag behind and maybe could take a few days or a week to recover from. So you don't have to have such an aggressive recovery plan for everything. One other part for preparation that is extremely critical after the planning aspect of it is the incident response testing and procedures. So I call it pressure testing. It must work consistently, and there's two things you get out of it. First, once you run through the test, it must work and work consistently. And then you're going to come out with some type of error or gaps in the plan, and those things need to come out and updated and improved over time. So your testing results should tell you, is your plan likely to work? And does it give you a list of gaps that should be addressed? Those processes that you put down there, they should be codified, documented, and regularly tested for vulnerabilities. I was asked the other day in a conference, how do you pressure test a system? And I think risk assessment takes a big part in putting that plan together. So as I said with inventory management, if you have visibility into your most critical applications and systems and personnel, then you can begin to build scenarios where those critical components may be offline. You can incorporate limiting factors such as the network is offline, your communication is down, such as email, or Active Directory has been breached and you can't trust that environment. You can't trust the authentication mechanisms. So you can build for scenarios like that, those are real world case scenarios to plan for when you start to put together that incident response pressure testing. So one of the main things we like to really discuss at Recovery Point, or really to drive home anyways, is this rule. It's the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. And as we have it laid out here, it's a recommendation and it's best practice to follow where you keep 3 copies of data. You keep them on 2 different media sets. Keep one of those copies off-site, preferably at Recovery Point, and then keep that copy air-gapped. So you can keep it in tape, have it ejected from the tape library and vaulted. And more preferred method these days is immutability, keep it out on object storage. So immutability is where the data set is written, but it can't be deleted and it can't be altered. And then finally, the 0 there is you have to test. That's where you test that those backups are actually recoverable and you can restore your data from them. One thing to think about is that it's a big trap if you don't have immutable backups, because the cyber attack is unfortunately going to come after your backups. And if you have no backups, or if they were not held in an immutable state, they'll come after those and they'll delete those, and then you're toast. You have nothing to fall back on. And then you have to also realize that even if you have those immutable copies of backups, you can't really start recovering in 10 minutes. You have to begin a restoration process where you may bring a recovery point back from a backup set that is still infected or is completely encrypted, and it's unusable. So you have to step back to the next backup recovery point until you find one that maybe could be infected or is infected but is not yet encrypted, and it's still a usable set of data. And then you can begin the sanitization process and then continue through that rinse and repeat until you can bring your data sets back online. So some of the key services and features that Recovery Point can help you with are business continuity consulting. And that's what we're talking about. You can run a systems impact analysis, which is a lighter weight business impact analysis. The systems impact analysis is going to give you the results of an application data set mapping to a system mapping to a risk rating for your business. And from there, you can start to build out your recovery plans. Recovery planning for runbooks. So we use automation as much as possible to create runbooks that'll step through the recovery sequence in a programmatic fashion. And once you have something built like that, then you can apply regular testing cycles where you can almost remove the human element to that and auto test and then collect the results to see, do I have everything that I need to recover? Do I have replication of it? Do I have backups of it? Was it clean? How fast could I recover from it? And just cycle through that continuously. Of course, immutable backups are always key. Those are table stakes. You must have a set of backups that is your last line of defense, immutable or air-gapped. And then the isolated recovery environment is also key during a cyber event. Your production site might be shut down. You need a new environment, a clean environment to restore into. And you need it to be isolated. So systems may still be trying to talk outbound, beacon out back to the attacker's command and control center. Or you just don't want them crosstalk between multiple systems as you start to do the restore procedures. And so you need an isolated environment where you restore from backups or data sets, bring them in, be able to step through them with your cybersecurity tools. Your incident response team can take a look and analyze those. Sanitize the system, restore it back to the production side, and then move on to the next system. So I'm going to hand this off to Aaron now for a quick demonstration with our resiliency console.
Thanks, Jeff. So as we've been kind of alluding to here today, it's our topic of conversation, is kind of how to recover from a ransomware attack. But a big part of that, obviously, as we've been discussing, is planning, right? So having a good plan in advance is really your best line of defense. And there's developing a plan like that can be challenging on its own, but there's some things that really need to be considered that often aren't immediately apparent. So one of those, as an example, is dependencies. So there's a lot of interdependency across environments a lot of times where you might have one system or application that requires another system or application to run under normal circumstances. So, kind of understanding the relationships between different parts of your environment is kind of the keystone to coming up with a plan that really works. And so what I'm showing right here now, this is our system for documenting those aspects of recovery plans. This is our resiliency console that we use here at Recovery Point. And having a tool like this to be able to kind of document your environment and really get into the details of what your plan is going to look like upon execution or upon testing is kind of critical to being able to survive one of these attacks. So we're looking at a device right here, ERP Server 01, and if we look at the dependency graph for this device, you can see that there's kind of a chain of things here that we really require in order for this endpoint device to operate correctly. Like Active Directory, for example, as an application, there might be some processes involved in recovering Active Directory, like seizing FSMO roles and making sure that it's responding to LDAP queries and things like that. So there's a whole host of recovery steps that you have to take to actually bring a device or service or application back online. And having documentation, good documentation around that is key if you're going to have a smooth recovery. So the one important thing about this is keeping track of these dependencies is that not only does this give you sort of a step-by-step, how do you get through a recovery successfully and smoothly, but also it can tell you some things about the scope of impact too. For example, if we got hit with a ransomware attack that affected our Active Directory, then we can tell, just by looking at this graph, that also is going to impact our ERP systems all the way down to this individual server. So it's not just an attack that affects our Active Directory doesn't just affect Active Directory, it affects lots of things. So being able to kind of track all those relationships and interdependencies is really crucial to understanding the scope of how an attack is going to affect you. The other consideration that goes along with that, we're looking at systems here and that are clearly distributed systems, but a lot of environments kind of cross large boundaries. Jeff had mentioned that we have services around mainframe, and we may have mentioned that we have services around power systems, but also public cloud services. So things like AWS and Azure. If you have services in the public cloud, it's important to understand, just as we do with individual devices and applications, the interrelationships between those things. So like here, for example, we have an EC2 instance of an AWS that has a dependency on Active Directory as well, and our ERP databases. So being able to kind of recover holistically, that's a big challenge, because a lot of times there's multiple teams and players and stakeholders involved in all these different systems, and they're thinking about their little piece over here, but you really need a plan that accounts for the big picture and kind of connects all these things together, and you have to have a thorough understanding of the entire environment holistically to be able to recover successfully. So the last thing I wanted to mention is during a recovery event, whether you're doing a test of your systems, a DR test, to make sure that you're able to execute on your plan efficiently, or which you should be doing regularly to account for drift and things like that. In IT, everything is a moving target, so there's constantly changes happening within your environment, and you need to make sure that those are captured and encapsulated within your DR plan, and that you're accounting for all of that. So regular testing is absolutely a must, and being able to track kind of where you're at during the testing process is really important. And that's another reason why we use this resiliency console tool that we've built to kind of track where you're at during a test or during a recovery event. You can really kind of get granular with the status of any individual piece of your environment, the timing of when you started and completed recoveries and things like that. And that can really give you a snapshot over time of where your roadblocks are, where your holdups are, knowing which processes in your plan are going to work smoothly and which ones might need a little bit of tuning. This kind of plays in with all of the things that we've been talking about with the dependency tracking. If you are aware of those dependencies, you can track kind of during a plan, or during an exercise or during a DR event, recovery event, which pieces are ready for recovery and which ones still require other pieces to be completed first. So having that kind of chain of things and understanding what those are and being able to reference that quickly during a recovery event really is the best way to get a smooth recovery process down and make sure that you can survive one of these types of attacks. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Jeff, so we can close up here. But I think that's a pretty good summary of why it's so important to have a tool like our resiliency console or something similar to be able to track all these things about your recovery plan. Absolutely.
Thank you, Aaron. That was good. So we're going to leave you with this, and then we'll take some Q&A, but it's our resiliency plan checklist. I don't have to read it really word for word for you, but one of the main things to focus on would be pressure test your incident response plans. Put a good plan in place. Make sure you have immutable backups, and then test, and test. It's pretty much mantra around recovery point. So thank you, and we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Jeff and Aaron. Let's just dive into a couple of audience questions here. The first one here is from Tim, who asks, what is the impact on the RTO and RPO after a ransomware attack?
Thanks. So can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We can hear you great.
Okay, thanks. The impact on the RTO and RPO really, it ties back into how much investment you made in your incident response preparation. That's really going to play into, what kind of recovery point objectives you want to be able to roll back to. So, if you're using something like a Zerto solution, you might have a ability to roll back into using their journal back in time to back in a few minutes, or a day, or even back 30 days if you really needed to. And then, based on the preparation and planning processes, that'll tie into your recovery time objectives too. So it's a balance between your budget, the risk to the business, and that'll dictate the solution that you have to put in place to be able to have the correct mappings of recovery point and time objectives that make sense for your company.
Great.
I think dwell time can have an impact on RPO potentially as well, depending on how cleanup efforts are implemented post attack. If a threat actor was in your environment for an extended period of time before an attack was actually executed, that can be a factor in how what your RPO actually is effectively.
Great. And then another one here from you from MJ. Can you provide some tactics around dealing with ransomware dwell time?
Yes, the tactics around, like from a DR, we're a disaster recovery service provider. So tactics around dealing with dwell time are part of the response plan. Somebody had commented earlier that, the threat actors had been sitting in their environment for months, and even their backups were compromised. So you really need an alternate site to restore into that provides a clean room environment. So even if those backups, if the dwell time has been, say, 30 days and you're only keeping 30 days of backups, the backups may be infected but not encrypted. So there's still a chance that you can restore that set of data. So if you have an alternate environment to restore into, you can bring systems up isolated, even between systems, scan those systems, sanitize or check if the data is still good, or then if it's good, promote it back into production. If it's not, I'll try an alternate restoration point and just continue through that process, rinse and repeat until you can get the data restored.
Great. And then I think one more question for you guys from Michael. What about the data that was exfiltrated? Is there preparation for making that harder for them to use? Is data classification one of your services?
That is a critical point in risk planning and doing an impact analysis on your business. So understanding what data sets you have and then the criticality to the business is extremely important to be able to plan out your response strategy. If you're aware of those data sets, and then if the data was exfiltrated, it's going to give you a bargaining chip if you do have to potentially pay the ransom. You may not have to pay as much by having an understanding that the data they stole was not extremely critical to your business. So it's not as valuable, and you can negotiate at that point.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jeff and Aaron, for a great presentation and another Q&A. Folks, if Jeff and Aaron didn't get to your question in time, do just keep typing it into the console and we'll make sure we get your question over to the Recovery Point team. Thanks, guys.